Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining our live webinar on retaining your best accounting and finance staff in 2015 through the power of stay interviews. This presentation is going to be hosted by Halcyon Finance and Accounting. So we are a leading provider of recruitment and staffing and search services within the Greater Toronto Area, and more importantly with our great guest speaker, Richard Dick Finnegan. So Dick is the CEO of C-Suite Analytics and author of both Rethinking Retention in Both Good Times and Bad, and The Power of Stay Interviews for Engagement and Retention, and which was actually the CHRM's #1 best-selling book. Dick's been cited by Business Week and Chief Executive Magazine and Consulting Magazine as a leading thinker on employee retention. And just before we go any further, everyone will be getting a copy of this recording made available. So without further ado, I would like to pass it over to Dick Finnegan, and he can certainly start with the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Artie. Hi, everyone, and welcome to our program on the power of stay interviews. And I'm grateful for you attending. And I understand for those of you in the Toronto area, it's been an inclement weather day. I hesitate to tell you that I live in Florida. We don't have inclement weather today, but I grew up in the Northeast, and boy, I know what it's like. And so, gosh, bear with it. Spring will be here sometime. What we're going to do is talk today about this idea of stay interviews. And what I'm going to do is draw a big line, a big difference between the way companies try to solve retaining and engaging their top talent and a new way to do it. And the new way includes stay interviews as the centerpiece. Artie, could you advance to the next slide?
Yes.
My background is I'm sorry, there you go, one before.
Okay.
That I'm a recovering HR director, as the slide says, and began a business to help companies cut turnover because I learned some secrets. I'll tell you the secrets in just a few minutes, and have worked around the world with banks in Siberia, gold mines in Africa, corporations across China. I've been commissioned by the CIA. So I have a lot of rings around my trunk on this whole retention thing in all parts of the world. And I've written several books, and the one you see first, Rethinking Retention in Good Times and Bad, was published in 2009 when nobody cared about retaining people. They just wanted to cut everybody. But Business Week excerpted the book and ran a chapter around the world and said you ought to rethink what you're doing. And then this middle book, The Power of Stay Interviews, was published by, you can see the letters SHRM, that stands for the Society for Human Resources Management, the Global Professional Association for HR. And they actually asked me to write that book based on something I said in the first book, and that is now the top-selling book in the history of SHRM. That led to this third book you see, which is being published right now. It's literally at the printer, being published by Amacom, a global publisher in 20 languages, and an audiobook called The Stay Interview. So the stay interview idea is here to stay, pardon the pun, and what we'll do today is explore more about where it fits and why it fits so well. So Artie, if you can go to the next slide, I'll show you quickly the agenda. I'm going to introduce the stay interview idea. I'm going to talk about trust because the #1 reason the employees stay or leave or engage or disengage is whether they trust their boss. Then we're going to talk about how stay interviews work, and at the end I'm going to ask you to participate in a little survey that you'll find really interesting about what makes people happy. So Artie, if you can go to the next slide, we'll start by saying the official definition of a stay interview is a structured discussion a leader conducts with each individual employee to learn the specific actions that leader must take to strengthen that employee's engagement or retention with the organization. Now, what it doesn't say is it says leader, it doesn't say HR should do this. It says individual employees, that means don't do it in a group. It's literally one-on-one, eyeball to eyeball, with a series of questions about what can I do to make your work a better place. Now, if you pause for a moment and you say, well, gosh, we do all these surveys, we know what employees think. Well, we don't because We get exit survey data, and study after study says we don't do anything with it. And I've actually asked, I'm up to now 6,800 HR executives who I've spoken to in the last 2 years in group meetings, and I say, do you do exit interviews? Everyone raises their hands. Then I say, how many of you have significantly improved your company because you do them? And the number of hands up so far is, out of 8,600, 12. So we know they don't work. And then we know that engagement surveys give you data, but they give you one strip of data, and it's as though everybody thinks, just like this data says, it's like everybody has 2.4 children, but you can't have 2.4 children. And so we say, this is what everybody thinks. We can't segregate it from top performers, and we think it implies solutions, but as I'll prove to you, it doesn't. So the great advantages to stay interviews on the bottom of that slide are always current, focus on individual employees, and you can seek out top performers. And thirdly, and most importantly, they put managers in the solution seat and not HR. So Artie, if you can leap to the next slide, I want to show you data. Now this is U.S. data, and I realize many of you are Canadian, but the data is very close. And what you can see is from 2009 through 2013, the percent of people in the workforce who voluntarily quit keeps going up. When I update that slide, when data comes out in 2 weeks, it's going to go to 22% for 2014. The high forever is 26% in 2006. So we're knocking on the door of the highest ever. So even though unemployment is, it's not that much high anymore in the U.S., but it's higher than we would like. It's like once you get in the club, once you get over the steel fence and you get a job, you can change jobs pretty easily. But Artie, if you go to the next slide, I find this slide to be more interesting and flat out fascinating. And what this slide says is, according to Gallup, and again, this is U.S. data, but I think we'll find Canadian data mirrors it, that if you run your eyeball to the bottom left and you see 2000, the year 2000, then run it up the side, you get to 2012. And if we had data for 2013, it would be identical. What you see is that dark green to the far right, that group represents people who are engaged. The middle group says not engaged, the light green, the biggest group. So it doesn't say sort of engaged, kind of engaged. It says, nope, they're not engaged at all. And the group in the black is actively disengaged. They sabotage your company. Now, 3 things are notable on this slide. The first one is the percent of engaged employees is little. It's between 26 and 30%. So it's not a lot. So unless, and we would all say, but that's not our workforces. But if we all say it, it can't be true. So if you're the average workforce, then only about 30% of your people at best are really contributing to profitability. Isn't that mind-blowing? That 7 out of 10 aren't, and you're paying them salary, benefits, and everything else. So it's a small group. Secondly, it hardly ever changes. And if you mirror the line of the dark green by year against issues like the economy, issues like the Consumer Confidence Index, issues like 9/11, we've had every reasonable possible change since 2000, but nothing shakes this up, which has to tell you it only depends on what's happening in our buildings, not what's happening outside of our buildings. And then you look to the right in red. Again, this is a U.S. number, $1.53 billion with a B. So we're spending $1.5 billion each year to change nothing. We are not changing anything. And so turnover's going up. Engagement is completely stagnated. No matter how much money we spend on surveys and comp surveys and buying more benefits and all those things, we cannot move the needle. Now, Artie, if you could race to the next slide, I will quickly show you that, Artie, can you go to that? There you go. That engaged employees produce a lot of work. There are many studies that say, there's Gallup, 22% more profitability comes from that engaged group, lower turnover, and you can go down the line, you can see other studies, but trust me in the interest of time, there's tremendous research available if you dig for it, that the more engaged employees you have, the more money you make. Now, Artie, you can go to the next slide. I will tell you the secret. The secret is in this slide. So I'm going to pose it as a question to all of you and ask you to answer it on your own. Or if you're in a conference room with colleagues, answer it out loud to your colleagues. So here's the question. Do you solve retention Or we could substitute engagement with accountabilities or programs. So if you draw your eye to the left, you see the little organization chart. We know, Peter Drucker taught us, this is the way it works on the 6 inhabited continents, that the way you get things done is executives say to the EVP, who says to the VP, and on, here's the critical metric, here's the goal, we're going to track you against it, we're going to have a report with your name on it that says goal, performance, difference, good, bad. That's how we get things done on sales and service and quality and safety. So that's how we run organizations. That's what works. We're good at that. But on the right it says, or do you solve these things with programs? So for example, employees say on a survey, I want more recognition, so do you therefore have Employee Appreciation Week and Employee of the Month? Or employees say they want more communication, more information, do you have town hall meetings? So do you solve things with programs, or do you solve them through accountabilities? When I said earlier that SHRM asked me to write the standard review book, the SHRM publisher said to me, it was a great line. This is what, I didn't want to do it. I'd already written a book. I wrote a book, so I could say I wrote a book. Writing a book takes a lot of work. And he said to me, I'd like to meet the first person who said, when your engagement survey says employees want more recognition, the answer is Employee Appreciation Week and Employee of the Month. Because what they really are asking for is a picnic and to watch somebody else get an award. It was funny, but it was right. So if you are saying, as you sit there with yourself or with colleagues, we're on the left, you're way ahead of the game, because you can see bottom right, it says only 86% of companies would say we're on the right. We're totally invested in programs. And I'm going to prove to you, before I get back to standard reviews, that if you don't hold leaders accountable, and when I say leaders, I mean CEOs, EVPs, first-line supervisors, all those people, if they don't have a goal for engagement or retention and they're measured against it and there are consequences for it, you can't win. You will constantly chase your tail and have better programs, have the reserve for Employee of the Month parking. You'll do all those things which aren't bad. They're just not good enough. And one of the reasons they're not good enough is because a jerk boss will overcome and trump any of them. So Artie, if you can go to the next slide, I will further prove the point. So you get data, exit surveys, employee surveys, engagement surveys. Data, yes. Solutions, no. No. In fact, the person in charge of surveys for one of the global survey firms, the company, if I told it to you, you would know it, said to me, our only interest is giving data. We do not try to tell people what to do. It's not our job to improve the data. Just give them data. So companies are spending. You know, Gallup will not take a contract for engagement surveys below $250,000. So companies are writing huge checks to get data. Then they compare themselves to benchmarks, and if their score is 60 and the benchmark is 59, they high-five each other like they won the Super Bowl. But the reality is you're just one hair better than mediocre. So this whole industry of surveys is just off track. Artie, if you can go to the next slide. So backwards, please. So let's begin proving the point. So the slide says supervisors' impact on engagement and retention. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 studies that talk about this. So the first says if you have a turnover problem, look first to your managers. Now look first is a pretty casual phrase, but this is from the really great book, First Break All the Rules by 2 Gallup consultants, looking at over 1 million pieces of data, and they say absolutely the place to start is with the boss. Then we have why do people stay? Managers first, coworkers second. Nothing about pay, nothing about benefits, nothing about Employee Appreciation Week. They stay for the people in their immediate circle. In fact, when employees go home and have dinner, what do they talk about? They talk about, do I trust my boss, do I respect my colleagues, and do I like what I do? That's what they talk about. They don't talk about pay and benefits. Then you get to engagement. The higher the level is with the supervisor, the higher it is with the team, the lower it is with the supervisor, the lower it is with the team. Then you get to when employees stay, it's because of their immediate managers. Well, that's not new at this point, except that's for teachers. Who would have thought teacher turnover is about principals versus being capped out, being career stalled, being tired of being with little kids with runny noses? It's about principals. Now we get to a different turf on the bottom. If you stay primarily for your supervisor, You're the reason I stay. I like working with you. You're really the reason I stay. You stay longer, which cuts turnover. You perform better, which improves engagement. And you are, gulp, more satisfied with your pay. So now we begin to see the universal impact of good bosses. So Artie, if you flip to the next slide, we'll really hammer this point home, because a global consulting firm interviewed 1,000 people who recently quit and asked 5 questions: pay, benefits, development, advancement, relationship with your boss, and got the absolute straight flush, that the more you liked your boss, the more you liked your pay, benefits, development, and advancement. And the less you liked your boss, the less you liked your pay, benefits, development, and advancement. Now, they concluded at the bottom, Artie, if you go back, please, that offering a higher salary or developmental opportunity may not be enough to retain employees. In other words, that's soft talk for give them more money, promote them. But if they still are not turned on by their boss, they're going to quit. You're doing the wrong things. So the prism, the vision through which employees see their work, their company, is how they see their relationship with their boss. It is as clear as it can be. And if you just pause for a moment and think to yourself, okay, earlier this guy talked about Employee Appreciation Week, Employee of the Month, town hall meetings. All of those things are the common solutions we put into place based on surveys. But all of those things work around the supervisor. It's as though we're saying, we're just going to skip over you. Either it's too hard to get you to be right, or it's too complicated, or I think the big reason is you don't have time to really meet with people and manage them. We're going to help you by doing these programs. The programs don't work. That's why turnover is going up, and that's why engagement is completely stuck, because we're going around the solution instead of working through the solution. It's really as simple as that. If everybody understood that and acted accordingly, I would have to go find new skills and have a new job. It's really as simple as that. Everybody, and I'm telling you, we work on 6 continents, is convinced the way you keep employees and motivate them is by giving them things. It's not about things. It's about trusting your boss. So Artie, let's go to the next slide. And this is fun, and we're going to do this fast, just to say which side matters more, left or right. So pay, benefits, bonuses, Employee Appreciation Week. And by the way, the average company spends 70% of its dollars on pay and benefits. So you'd see all those things, our career ladders, I'm scanning onboarding, training, monitoring a team meeting there, all that stuff. Or Artie, go to the next slide, and it's going to say employees trust their direct supervisors and all levels throughout the organization. So the obvious answer is the right side matters more. We spend all this money, spend all this time, have all these staff to manage the left side. If we can just get leaders to build trust, we win. We win. And I say it because I'm a therapist. I'm trained to be a therapist, so I'm a head bobber by training. And what I found to be true throughout my whole life that correlates with what I learned in school is human relationships spin on 2 variables, trust and self-esteem. You stick with people who are looking out for you, and you stick with the people who make you feel good about being you. And one way to think about this is, if you think about the best boss you ever had, and then you think about the worst boss you ever had, then I would bet you $20. The best boss was someone you trusted, and the worst boss was someone you did not. And I would bet you another $20 that the best boss was someone who had shortcomings, but you so easily accepted those shortcomings. It's almost like they were cute because they couldn't do something well. But the flip side is the worst bosses, the ones you didn't trust, had strengths. They could do some things well, but you were blinded. You were blindfolded to those strengths because you didn't trust them and because they were a jerk. And the simple definition of a jerk boss is somebody others don't trust. So if we could just put a chip in everybody's head and make them trustworthy, it'd be great. But we can't because, first of all, we just can't. But secondly, work is a rat's nest for trust because of pressure, because of competition, because of authority. It's just not designed for it. So it takes really exceptional people to consistently build trust at work. And I'm sure if you pause for a moment and say, well, best boss I had, worst boss I ever had, who was trustworthy, who wasn't, what the trustworthy wouldn't do, what did the non-trustworthy were non-trustworthy one not do? Or who do I know? Who in my company do I want to model myself after because they really act in trustworthy ways? It's rare, isn't it? It's hard to find people who are so good at this, who manage people, but they're the ones who will have high engagement and low turnover. Okay, Artie, let's skip from here. And I want to conclude, obvious conclusion here with this ugly-looking person pointing her finger at us, that it's probably not ugly except in this picture, that good programs plus good supervisors, you win. Good programs, poor supervisors, you lose. It's really that simple. A jerk boss will trump any bad programs. So if you go from here, Artie, we can move ahead now and talk briefly, and I'm going to talk fast about trust. So Artie, go from this slide, if you will. So here's the question I said earlier, best boss, worst boss. So let's go from there, Artie, to the next slide, which is going to say who is your worst boss. And we see Lumberg here, if you remember Lumberg from Office Space. So from here, I want to get to this whole idea. Go move, Artie, if you will, to Google. Now, why would we talk about Google? Well, the Fortune Top 100, every February, Fortune names the top 100 companies to work for. And Google won in 2014. In 16 years they've done it. Google has won 5 times. It came number 1 5 times. So you look at this slide, you see this gentleman with his laptop, and it says Google donates $50 for every 5 hours an employee volunteers. Last year, a new program sent employees to Ghana and India to work on community projects. So you would say, okay, if we want to be the best company to work for, we need to start sending people to Ghana and India, because that's what Google does, and that's why they are a great company. Artie, can you go to the next slide? Now we say in 2013, we have this woman coming down a slide between floors, and we say the Internet Jughead takes Best Companies crown for the 4th time, not just for the 100,000 hours of subsidized massages. Now we have to do that. New this year, 3 wellness centers. How many of those do we have? 7-acre sports complex. Do we have one of those? Roller hockey rink, courts for basketball, bocce, shuffleball, and horseshoe pits. Do we have horseshoe pits? We need to have horseshoe pits. Artie, if you can go to the next slide, you'll see that Artie, can you go to the next slide? Unless you're stuck. Okay, so you see now 2012, now we're playing ping pong and foosball in the background. Employees rave about their mission, the culture, the famous perks, the flex, bocce courts, bowling alley, eyebrow shaping, 25 cafes all gratis. So now we know we need to have eyebrow shaping. Now, what happens with the Great Place to Work is you read the fine print at the end of every February's edition, and you read what's on this slide, except you read it in a really fine print. 2/3 of a company scores based on the results of the Great Place to Work's Trust Index survey. So you go, you say, well, what's this? What is this Great Place to Work Trust Index survey? You go online and you read what this is, and it says any company can be a great place to work. Our approach is based on the major findings of 20 years of research. The trust between managers and employees is a defining characteristic of the very best workplaces. So it doesn't say employees and executive management, employees and their companies. It's one-on-one. And so what's happening on this slide, think about what this means. This means for 16 years I've been buying this magazine and I've read about bocce courts and eyebrow shaping as though they really are the deal. They're not the deal. It's a sham. 2/3 of the score is about how many employees in these companies trust their boss. You don't have to have horseshoe pits. It's really a sham. It's really not an honorable thing that they do. However, it does say this to us. Google must have great bosses. They've come in not in the top 100, but number 1 5 times out of 16 tries. So they must have great bosses. So Artie, if you can advance the slide, we get a break here because the New York Times published an article on what makes a great boss at Google. Google did an internal study. So Artie, if you can move quickly to the next slide, what you'll see is technical expertise, the ability, say, to write computer code in your sleep, ranked dead last among Google's Big 8, the Big 8 reasons. What employees valued most were even-keeled bosses who made time for one-on-one meetings, who helped people puzzle through problems by asking questions, not dictating answers, and who took an interest in employees' lives and careers. So if we stand this slide for a moment and we say, okay, even-keeled, what does that mean? Haven't heard that term in decades. It means they don't freak out. It means you can go to them and say, this broke, I screwed this up, and they help you. They don't scream at you. They don't change their facial expressions. They don't freak out. But secondly, it's a two-parter here in this fuchsia color. They make time for one-on-one meetings. They are one-on-one available to people. They schedule meetings with people. But you know, so many companies say, we can't have more meetings with our team and our people because our managers are too busy. What are they too busy doing? Hiring people because they have such high turnover? What are they supposed to do? This is their job, is to be with their team and lead their team. The productivity comes from the team, not themselves. Then we go to 2, help people puzzle through problems by asking questions, not dictating answers. This reminds me of being a parent. This is where, and really it's about when, not all the time, that if your child says, I'll be home by 10, you say, no, you'll be home by 9:30. No, I'll be home by 10. No, 9:30, no more words. See you at 9:30, goodbye. Sometimes it's pretty quick. And some other times it's, you know, honey, I don't know. Let's talk about it. I don't know how to handle that. How do you think you should handle it? Let's talk about it. So you have to pick when you're going to puzzle through problems. What a great phrase. Then just dictate answers. Then third says, who took an interest in employees' lives and careers. That is so vanilla until you do an exercise. So the imaginary exercise I always think is, you go to all the managers and say, you know, here's some money, and I want you to have dinner one-on-one with everybody on your team in the next 2 weeks. One-on-one, then come back and tell me how it went. And the managers would say, well, okay. And they do 2 or 3 of those one-on-ones, and then come back and say, you know, I'm really busy. I think I'll do the rest in a group. Because some people they want to have dinner with more than others, and some they don't want to have dinner with at all. But if you take an interest in employees' lives and careers, it means you better either generate it genuinely or you better fake it really well. But you got to do it. And it is not as instinctive. It's not as reflective. It's not as plain vanilla as it looks. It takes work. It takes work. So, Artie, if you can go to the next slide. We get to a lesson. So we see the smart guy in the fuzzy hair who said insanity, we all know, is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. So it's not what you give them, it's how you treat them. And first-line supervisors most influence employees' relationships with managers, colleagues, and duties. So first line means if you're the CEO, you're a first-line leader because people report to you. If you're 2 levels up, you're a first-line leader because supervisors report to you. If you're a first-line supervisor, people report to you. It's whoever your boss is, they have the most influence over how long you stay and how much you engage. That's it. And again, we keep circling around them as though they don't matter, and we take them out of the equation. We need to put them front and center and make them responsible for their talent with goals and accountabilities. So Artie, if you can advance this slide. Back to our definition. Structured discussion a leader conducts with each individual employee to learn the specific actions she must take to strengthen an employee's engagement and retention with the organization. So Artie, let's go from here and let's put some meat on the bones about stay interviews. So I said earlier about exit engagement surveys. Problem with exit surveys is, first of all, they're just too long. Whether they're online, whether they're in interviews, you just want to know why they're leaving. You don't want the 1 to 10 on the cafeteria. Who cares? You just want to know why they're leaving. That's all you want to know. There's a book now that says, don't tell the truth in exit surveys, you'll kill your career. So people don't tell the truth. Or we have a category we let them check, or we check it, called better opportunity, which tells you nothing. You don't know how to change your company if it's better opportunity. It's why did you look? We don't follow up. We don't make changes. I always kid that they're autopsies because they're dead. They're really toe tags. They're just, you know, autopsies are better. Yet companies, you know, the metaphor for me is a chipped tooth. You chip a tooth. Your tongue keeps going over there to rub against the chipped tooth. You can't fix it. You just can't resist putting your tongue against it. It's kind of where I think companies are with exit surveys. Everybody knows they don't work. We just keep doing them and spending money and time on them. Engagement surveys, we get 1 line of data, average thinking. We know what people think, but we don't know how important the thing is to them. We get long administrative delays, we become annual temperature checks, and then we develop short-term feel-good programs that have nothing to do with supervisory skills. Now, Artie, if you can move the slide, we'll start talking about success stories. So here's 3 different industries. Hospital, hardest job to keep is nurses. Turnover down 37% in the first year. Nurse turnover down 70% in the first year because of stay interviews. Retirement community, nurse turnover down 70%. 100% retention for the first 180 days. They set a goal to retain 90% of new nurses. They kept them all, and they've always kept them all since. And then we go to call centers where, hang on, my screen has temporarily gone dark. Where I know this slide is about Hilton's call centers, where turnover was cut in half in 4 months. I'm going to have to pause for just a minute. I apologize for this. Okay, I've got it back. And also this is Nova One, different call center company where turnover was cut 20%. So we know this works in all industries. It'll work in your industry. If you work with clients, it'll work in their industries. Artie, could you go to the next slide, please? So some process key ingredients. First of all, it says conducted by supervisors, never HR. Some HR people will say, well, I meet with new hires at 90 days in a group. We bring cookies. It's not going to do it. They've got to bond with their boss. It's got to be separate from performance reviews. It can't be done like, well, we can't have another meeting. We don't have time. So when you do a performance review, when it's done, ask 3 questions about how are you doing. No, employees come to performance reviews saying, are you going to screw me on my rating and how much money am I going to get? It's not the right mood to do it. Then it says repeat every 6 months for all existing employees, or 2 times a year for new employees, with 1 the first 90 days, second 180 days. You know, you could do it once a year. Every 6 months is better. Then it says script the opening, script the questions and the probes and the closing, create individual stay plans for every single employee, and forecast retention. Let me pause here and tell you, this is not on the slide, but I'll tell you the 5 best questions to ask. And keep in mind as I say them, the skill is the probing. Tell me more. Give me an example. The skill is in the probing. So when managers learn, they have to be great at probing and courageous at probing. They have to dig deeper to get more information. The 5 questions are, first question, what do you look forward to when you come to work each day? So start with something positive and start with something local. You know, it's about your day, hour to hour. What things do you look forward to? Secondly, what are you learning here, and what would you like to learn? Third, why do you stay here? Tough question. People look at you, I don't know, paying benefits, but no, really, you're skilled. You could go other places, but you choose to stay here. What is it about here that creates glue for you? Tell me, because I want to understand what the leverage, I want to understand to make more of something for you, because I want to learn what's really important for you. Fourth question is, what could cause you to leave? Realistically, and a good probe is on a 1 to 10, how important is that to you? So what could cause you to leave? And fifth question is, what can I do as your manager to make this a better place for you to come to work? Ask those 5 questions. What things do you look forward to when you come to work? What are you learning here? Why do you stay? What could cause you to leave? What can I do as a manager to make this a better place for you to work? We've heavily researched those questions, and we know with the right probes, they will cause you to win. Artie, let's move from here and go to the next slide. So what are the skills? So when we train managers, because we train them for a day, we train them to build trust, we train them in skills, we practice probing. So always take notes, always take notes. Never do this without taking notes. It'll keep you on track, it'll keep you awake, it'll keep you separate in your mind from other stay reviews you've done, and will tell the employee you care. Secondly, be a great listener. Follow up with, let me tell you what I heard you say, see if I got it right. I want to make sure I'm fully understanding what you're telling me. Third, always probe and probe and probe. We have a phrase we use, which is probe deeply, solve completely. Get all the data you can from people to know what's important to them. And fourthly, take responsibility. Never say, well, you know, I know you wish your pay was more. We can't talk about that today. Besides, I don't have anything to do with that. No, it's what, you know, if that's what's important to them. Now, having said that, I just surveyed a group of managers who've conducted many stay interviews. And one of the questions I asked was, what's the #1 topic employees voluntarily talk about? The answer was job processes. If we just fix this, then I could be more productive. If we just had different equipment, if we had a different process or a policy, or if this department or this person, if you just fix this, I could get my job better. That's what they elect to talk about. So think about the questions. You know, what do you look forward to? What are you learning here? Why do you stay? Why could you leave? What can I do better? The yield is most often work processes, not pay, not benefits. So 4 skills. And as you look at those skills, I want you to pause for a moment and think about this. Many companies, either internally or externally, send their managers for what they call soft skills training, conflict resolution, situational leadership, all the popular courses. Studies tell us 90 days later, most managers really haven't changed much at all. But when you train people to do stay interviews and they have to continually apply it, you're not giving them just skills, you're giving them a process. And there's an outcome that they have to develop a stay plan for every employee. They're accountable for their turnover and their engagement scores, and they're accountable, as I'll show you in a minute, for their forecast. So Artie, let's go from here. So how often? Immediately and at least once annually. New hires 60 and 120 days. Now, there's another way to think about new hires, and it introduces the term tipping point. And what I mean by tipping point is most companies can tell you if we keep people this long, 90 days, 6 months, 12 months, they tend to stay a long time. So if you can get 2 stay interviews done with new hires inside of the tipping point, you will greatly reduce early turnover, which reduces all turnover. Then the last bullet says always disconnected from performance reviews, has to be a separate meeting. In fact, we say to our client companies, you know, if you do performance reviews in April, then do this 6 months opposite to October, I think it would be. I didn't count in my head, but you get the idea. Don't do it around performance reviews. Very separate meeting. So Artie, let's go from here. So stay interview action plans. Here's what I will do for you. Here's what you're going to do. Here's when you're going to do it, and I'm going to do it, and we'll meet again on this date. So real things. You know, it could be you want to learn more about how, you know, here's a great example that an employee would say, you know, I want to do other things in this company. I don't know much about marketing, but it interests me. Do you know anything about marketing? And the manager says, I don't know much about it either, but we have a head of marketing. Give me a couple of days to go talk to that person, see if we can work out a way for you to learn. They meet again in 4 days. The manager says, I got an idea. Head of marketing said, this person over here could coach you. She will meet with you for an hour a week for 6 weeks. How does that sound? Good idea? Yes, let's go. Now, there's a big lesson here. Many companies think every employee will want to grow. They don't all. Everybody will want training. They don't all want training, but some do, and it costs a lot of money. The reality is 70% of all learning happens on the job. Only 10% happens through courses. The other 20% happens through feedback. So 70% happens on the job. So every employee in your company is a potential teacher and coach, and we've got to learn to leverage it. Our client companies have many of these inter-department learnings going on where somebody has an appointment with somebody over here for 5 weeks, over here, and not so much that it disrupts work, but enough that it engages and retains people because they want to learn more. Another example of this, of an action plan, I will tell you, is when an employee says, I'm just so overwhelmed, I'm stressed, I'm not a good spouse, I get home, I'm tired, I'm sure with my kids, there's too much work, there's too much work, there's too much work. Most of us would say, well, let's go look at your calendar and figure out what things we're going to stop you doing because you have too much to do. The reality is it's usually not that at all. It's usually 1 or 2 things that bring great stress. It's not about volume, it's about stress. And through probing and quizzing in a stay interview, if you can, you know, tell me which one thing, well, you know, it's when I do this because I always get criticized and, you know, I'm in front of my peers. Does that bother? Well, of course it bothers me. Would you like to be criticized by everyone? Okay, well, let's think about how we can solve that thing. You know, let me help you be more prepared when you go to those meetings. Or let's meet with your peers and let's give them some training on how to give feedback. You solved the big thing. You've solved the big thing. And you don't have to address, I'm completely stressed, I have too many things to do. There's a big nut in there, you got to find it. Okay, Artie, let's go from here. So forecasting. So imagine, John Lennon time here, imagine that you take an Excel spreadsheet, you import performance ratings. So here we have the leader, upper left, Rodriguez. He has 4 direct reports: Kim Johnson, Bert Brown, Cindy Stone, Ralph Jimenez. The performance ratings, 5 is high on our scale. Kim Johnson's pretty good at a 4. Bert Brown's really good at a 5. Cindy Stone's at a 3. Ralph's not so good at a 2. After each stay interview, Rodriguez has gone into this database and clicked the color. And for Kim Johnson, he clicks green, which means I forecast she'll be here more than a year, and I'm going to provide a mentor for her, similar to what we talked about earlier with marketing. So Kim's got an action plan. I think she'll be around here. Bert, big trouble. He's our best performer, but he's red. He's going to be gone in 6 months because he said to me, look, I am burnt out. Headhunters call me all the time. You either need to make me a manager or I'm going to start taking their calls. So we're coaching him. We're building him skills to be a manager. We don't know if he'll accept those skills, if he can grow that way. We don't know he won't take a call. We're doing everything we can do, but I've got him red. He could be gone in 6 months, even though he's our top performer. Now, if you have this kind of data, believe me, your executives will look at it and say, what's going on with Bert Brown? Because he's a 5, he's a top performer, and he's red. And that's the kind of attention you want to retain your high performers. Cindy Stone's medium performer. Go to the far right. It says she's very pleased with her current role and circumstance. She's going to be here. She's green. Ralph, Ralph's going to be here at most 6 to 12 months. We're coaching him for performance. If he gets better, and if we think he wants to be here, we'll move him to green. If he gets worse, we're moving him to red. So imagine if all of your managers were coding all of your employees and forecasting how long they stay. And it's not scientific by any means, but I can tell you what will happen. The ones who are trusted and probe and get the most information, both from the stay interviews but daily interactions, they'll have the closest handle on how long people are going to stay. And they'll also be the most skilled to keep people longer than another manager would. The flip side is a lousy manager who rushes through the stay interviews and can't build trust will code everybody green. Everything's fine. And then they'll be losing people. So the great ones will rise. The medium ones will rise. The lousy ones might rise, might not. But this is a great tool. It's the lockdown tool to improve retention, but it's also a lockdown tool to measure how effective your leaders are doing their stay interviews. Okay, Artie, let's go from here as we wind to the close. So I mentioned earlier this study. This is fascinating. For me, this is as good as it gets. Gallup is surveying citizens of the world to learn what brings the most happiness for 100 years. So they are literally surveying samples of citizens in over 150 countries every year. And they recently released the results after 6 years. I always joke, I can't wait till the 100 years comes in so I can know what they said. It's a joke. But they recently released the data for 6 years. So one of these is the winner. It's the thing that makes people the most happy in life, in the whole world. So choices you can see: A, good health; B, a good job; C, love and respect from others; D, money and needs for needs and more; E, better life for your children. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So drum roll. I'll give everybody a moment to think about the answer. And by the way, E, which is better life for your children, I'll tell you that's not the answer. It came to my mind, though, because when I was commissioned to cut Turner for the CIA, and I always hesitate to say this sentence, I have friends who are spies. And so I said to my spy friends, how do you get people to tell you secrets? And they said, well, you have to build trust, and you have to convince them you can make their own government better for their lives or for their children. And when I said, how much money do we pay for secrets? They said the biggest thing we give away is college educations in the U.S. for their children. So better life for your children is a pretty important thing around the world. But drum roll, and now we can go to the answer, which I've already told you it's not that one. And the answer, Artie, as you change the slide, is a good job. Who would have thought it? Who would have thought it? But that is the key to happiness, the #1 key in this world. And this is all from a book you can see called The Coming Jobs War by Jim Clifton, who's the CEO of Gallup. And he says a good job is a steady job. You're working as many hours as you want to work. So what's it mean for us? It means people want the same thing we want. We just have to get better at building the environment for them. And stay interviews are the way to do it. They are, I was going to say they're more effective than surveys. Surveys aren't effective. It's not more. We've proven We are stuck on engagement. We are losing on turnover. And I will tell you, all the work we've done with our company, coaching companies to do stay interviews, training their leaders, staying in touch with them, it's incredible how their numbers get better, not just on turnover and on engagement, but on all productivity measures too. So Artie, if you can go, I think, one more slide. Oh, I think it's actually, yes, Jim Clifton from the book, Let's Get Rid of the Managers from Hell, double the number of great managers and engaged employees, have those managers lead on what actually matters. The country's employees will be twice as effective. They'll create far more customers. Companies will grow. Spiraling healthcare costs will decrease, and desperately needed GDP will boom like never before. There you have it. There you have it. The Gallup data and our work with stay interviews really mixes well. Okay, Artie, I think last slide. Yes, last slide. Here's my email address, dfinnegan at the bottom, dfinnegan@c-suiteanalytics.com. If you would like a paper on how to cost turnover and engagement, what dollar costs on them, which we do, the correlations, remember that slide I splashed quickly about correlations, more about that, productivity correlations to engagement, or a training game to train your managers to stay interview training game, email me, tell me the number of employees you have, and I'll be glad to provide those things. So Artie, I will turn the agenda back to you, and I know you're going to ask for questions, and maybe we've gotten some.
Yes, absolutely. Wow, what a terrific presentation, Dick. So many great aha moments, I know, for myself, and I'm sure for many of the people on the call. So I guess really it just comes down to the human relationship. I guess building that trust and bond with your employees, or if you're if you're employee with your manager, and really creating a good work environment for everyone to be happy. So what I'd like to do, and I'm already getting a couple of questions coming in. If we would just pause for about 30 seconds, I just want to give everyone a chance to type a question into the box for me, and I will certainly ask them to Dick. I already have one, a couple coming through right now. So Dick, firstly, it says, looking at that chart from the previous slide, how do you measure a stay interview? So with the green, yellow, and red, are those specifics that will we have to get from the book? Are they public somewhere that we could tap into?
The decisions of who is green, who is yellow, and who is red are in the mind of the manager, based on everything they know about working with them, but especially what they learned in the stay interview. So they should not say, how long do you think you'll be here? But if you do a good job saying, what things do you look forward to? What are you learning here? Why do you stay? What could cause you to leave? What can I do to do a better job for you? If you probe and employees trust you, they're going to tell you everything. Or if they tell you 50% of everything or 70% of everything, you're going to have a pretty good idea. Now, sometimes people quit with no notice because their mother gets cancer and they have to relocate 1,000 miles away, and there's nothing we can do about that. Not all turnover is controllable, but most of it is. Or at least we can keep people 3, 6, or 12 months longer than we would have kept them. And I don't mean by buying them back, just by managing them better and being in touch with them. And so those are just intuitive choices. They're not scientific. They're not meant to be scientific. The great value to it is, if I'm a manager and I know when I finish this meeting I have to pick a color and I'm going to be accountable for that color, I'm going to do this meeting better. And I'm going to manage this person better every day. There's an alternative to exit interviews, which we really value, which is let the manager of the supervisor go to the supervisor and say, well, you lost Betty. Tell me about it. How is Betty performing? Did you see this coming? You had Betty coded green. Why did you ever code green? What do you think is the real reason she left? Do you think you could have changed your behavior in any way to keep her? Can you think that if you changed your behavior, it would keep others? Those are the learning moments, versus the traditional junkie exit interviews the companies do.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, the questions are really coming in right now. I've got one that says, could you please email the slides to the participants? So a recording will be made of this presentation, so certainly we will share that link with everyone, so you could come back to it at any time. I've got another one. It says, Dick, in public accounting, employees often work for multiple managers and partners in any given period. Who should conduct the stay interview?
That's a great question. I think it should be whoever is accountable for them. So let's think of it this way. If you work for multiple managers because you have multiple clients or multiple projects, then if there's one manager above those managers, then maybe that's the one to do it with the current manager. But ultimately, if you don't have somebody assigned for accountability for that person, then they're not going to take this seriously. They've got to remember the whole idea of goals. They've got to be accountable for their talent before they're really going to be effective with it. So that's the trick. So it could become cumbersome because of that organization method, and we've dealt with that before working with accounting firms. But you got to pick somebody, and you say, okay, for the next 12 months, 6 months, 3 months, you own this person, you're accountable, you better not lose them. You better not lose them.
Terrific. Excellent. So it looks like we still have a few more minutes. I've got some questions coming in. Okay, got another great one here. Which comes first, trust or open conversation? How do we get employees to open up to their boss?
You know, here's one way to think about that. Make a list of the 1 or 2 or 3 best bosses you've had, and you know they build trust because that's why they're great bosses. And think about their qualifications. And I would think their qualifications include they ask a lot of open-ended questions, they let you talk, they listen to you, they take your instruction well, they care about what you say. They're interested in your life rather than just work. And if you think about the best bosses you've had, and they were the best ones because you trusted them, if you really think about their qualities, they'll give you the prescription.
Okay.
And by the way, let me add one other thought to that.
Oh.
There's 3 qualities trust-building leaders have that oftentimes are overlooked. The first one is not so overlooked, that's to listen. The second one is to apologize. The great leaders apologize, the lousy ones don't. The third one is great leaders always support the company. It doesn't mean they blindly follow. It just means they are able to say phrases like, you know, this change happened, this is coming down the pike, and I don't know all the details. I just know that people who make these decisions usually make good decisions, and they always know things we don't. So I'm ready to go. That's it. And if you don't agree, go tell somebody in private. But you got to be able to say they always know things we don't. An interesting thing about management that never gets talked about is if you get CEOs in a room and say what's most important to you, they'll say paying today's bills and growing the company for tomorrow. If you get middle managers in the room and say what's most important, they'll say doing good things for customers and employees. Those things are very different. And that's why CEOs make decisions that employees don't always understand. So we're lousy at communicating why we make those decisions, but as a manager, you've got to take them on faith.
Terrific. Very informative answer there. I've got a few more here. I'm hoping everyone can stay with us for a couple more minutes. I think this question bit are very important. I've got a question here. Our retention has always been very high. Are stay interviews really beneficial for us if we don't really have an issue with turnover?
Well, some companies have high retention and they wish they didn't have it so high. They have it because they don't drive people to improve and change, or they don't drive people out. So assuming that your high retention is all good, assuming it's all for positive reasons, yeah, I'd still do it, because why not have higher, but why not have more engagement? I mean, just think about on the surface. What's the one thing that can go wrong from having stay interviews? What's the biggest objection? It's that managers have to get to know their people and take time. And so what's the matter with that? So yeah, do it. It's really cool.
Good. Excellent. Good answer. And so on another question I've got here, what if managers don't have the time to conduct the stay interviews?
Make it. I can say that just so instinctively. We'll go make the time. But if they don't have the time, then they really ought to sit down and say, why don't I have the time? What is wrong with me or the structure of my job or my organization? So I'll give you a negative example. One of the reasons nurse turnover is so high is because The average number of nurses a nurse manager manages is 60. Now that's ridiculous. So why is this? It's because all hospitals do the same thing. And they have charge nurses who are on the floor, they answer questions, they do the scheduling, but they're not supervisors. They're not trained to do it. They don't have the skills to do it. They're just robotic people who help nurses get through the day. But when you say to a nurse, when's the last time you saw your boss, the standard answer is the last time I screwed up. And if you work the night shift, your boss works the day shift, so it's, well, maybe sometimes I see her at 7:30 in the morning. So it's really screwed up. It's really screwed up. And what our hospital clients do is they take those charge nurses and they say, we're going to make your job a manager job instead of a charge nurse job. We're going to ask you to reapply for it to see if you have the skills. We're going to bump your pay $3,000. And they change the staff ratios. So that's one reason why some people don't have time, because the organization isn't designed right for them.
Good, excellent. And I think just due to time and kind of respecting everyone's time there, we'll get through one more question that I've got here, and it says, if managers have retention goals, doesn't that mean they won't need to fire people to maintain them?
You know, another good question. And intuitively, you think that's true. But what happens instead is their manager makes sure they fire people. And you know, the purpose of having goals isn't to say you missed your goal, you're fired. It's to say you missed your goal, what happened? Let's look at everybody who left and figure out why. And as long as there are good reasons, nobody is going to hurt you. So management at the top has to reinforce that from the start, and then people get fired. And people need to get fired.
Good, excellent. Yeah, that's, I guess, a great takeaway point to kind of end the presentation with. Is sometimes, you know, even with a stay interview, it may be time to move on for your employee within the organization.
Right.
Fantastic. Well, Dick, from myself, and I'm sure on behalf of everyone on the call, again, there's a lot of great aha moments and takeaways, and thank you so much for your time and coming over and sharing, you know, your wealth of knowledge with us. And I'm not sure if you have anything to end the presentation with. I know you mentioned for everyone to follow up with you at dfinnigan@csuiteanalytics.com to get some of that further information from you. And so anything else that you would like to kind of end the presentation with for you?
I would just say keep the dialogue going. Feel free to interview me if you have a question or thought. This is a really good idea. It's really game-changing, and it's hard for people to see it, in part because it sounds too simple. Come on, where's the technology? And by the way, we actually have technology for stay interviews, and to give you an example of how powerful the idea is, the companies who use our technology, our software, we guarantee turnover will fall 20% in the first year, or we return your money. So believe me, this is a powerful thing.
Wow.
Let me know if I can help you in any way.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Dick. Again, we appreciate your time. And, you know, certainly for everyone on that call, once again, this presentation was brought to you by our firm, Halcyon Finance and Accounting. So we are a leading provider of recruitment, search, and staffing services here in the Greater Toronto area. So if there are any questions or you require any further information from myself, my name is Artie Sadi. I'm the director here at the firm, and my email address is artie@halcyonfinance.ca, and you could check us out on the web at www.halcyonfinance.ca. So once again, everyone, thank you so much for your time, and we will make sure this live, the link for the recording goes out to you. Thanks so much. Talk to you soon.
Thank you all. Good to be with you. Artie, thanks for having me.
No problem. Thank you, Dick. Thanks.
Goodbye.